maybe you can kick us off. What kind of got you thinking about a morning routine? I know that this kind of sets our intention for the day, but also you and I have talked a little bit about what we've been doing in our morning routines to just kind of see what's been successful. And I guess I'll answer my own question, which is that's how this got kicked off was, what do you do? I think you were asking me, about my quiet time or maybe something because I had shared something along those lines. And we thought about how impactful it's been for us to have a morning routine and figured that we could share ours and hopefully reinforce the value of it and maybe encourage others who don't have that to maybe integrate that into their day because of the value that we've seen in it. And we're not the only ones, to be sure. I can all but guarantee every successful person has a morning routine and more than that, a daily routine. Anytime you read a leadership book, a success book, a self-help book, a growth book, or whatever, there's some alluding to a routine, some discipline, and consistency. Like those are three things that always come about. And they may be said in different ways, but at some level, you need those three things. And it's not just one, it's having a mixture of those. And there's other things that are sprinkled and salted in there too, but got to have those. Those are some of those kind of essential nutrients, if you will. So, where do you want to go?
A big part of what we're trying to do here is provide tools for other people in a similar situation, primarily, people who have families or who are, husbands and wives with kids who are trying to get their families moving in a better direction or moving in a, growing their health and their wealth. That's kind of one of the things. This is very much I think this has inroads to both health and wealth. I think morning routine, oftentimes we maybe would focus more on the health side because there are a lot of kind of physical activities, relating to sleep, relating to exercise, et cetera, that we'll get into. But I think there's parallels on both ends or inroads there. And so kind of to your question of like, what brought this about, just exactly what you said, there are a lot of people that talk about the importance of routine, a lot of successful people. I think there's also on the other end of the spectrum, there's a joke about there are two kinds of entrepreneurs, the ones who cold plunge and have red lights in the morning and journal and meditate, and then the ones that actually make money. So it's like, there's that I kind of wrestle with that a little bit in terms of, that's one of the things I see out there in internet culture right now is there is a lot of attention paid to morning routines and all these little biohacks that you can do. And at some point, right, the two ends of the spectrum, at some point, the work needs doing. I equate it kind of like a warm-up for exercise, right? The point is not the warm-up. The warm-up is there to get you ready for the exercise session that's at hand or the game that's at hand. And I think very much like in exercise, you can go too far into a morning routine where I have to do every single little thing and it's going to take me 3 hours. I've got to do this exactly the same way every day or I don't perform. And I think that's the danger of getting too involved in a morning routine, right? You can go too far into it. I think we'll get into the details that have worked for us and why. But I think as a footnote, I wanted to bring that up kind of before we get too far in is it's the warm up, right? You can use it to help prep and get you ready, whether it's psychologically or physically or both, for a successful day. And kind of looking at how do you want to start your day and what are some of the tools that we've identified as helping us start our day, but make sure it's not turning into a reason to procrastinate or a hindrance to actually getting the work done or further a psychological limiter that says, if I didn't do my morning routine, I can't function today. It's a bad day. So I think we got to kind of maybe at least acknowledge that this is the warm up. What do you want your warm up to look like? Very much similar to exercise. There's a general portion where we want to get the heart rate moving and the blood flowing, right? Maybe that's the first thing we do out of bed is start the movement process. And then there's a specific portion of the warm up in exercise or exercise or game where we get into how do we best prepare ourselves physically for the specifics of the exercise session or game that we're about to embark on. So that's how I'm kind of viewing this. And like you said, a lot of it's just through that lens of we have spent time talking, you and I, about what do you do in the morning? What are you thinking about? Or what's your quiet time look like? What are you writing about? Identifying some of those tools. Again, the hope with all of this is that we're providing some stuff that hopefully can benefit others. So that's I think we're probably very much on the same page there of just trying to share what's worked for us. And we'll get into some research as well of what is supported in terms of some of these activities. And so I guess with that as a background, my first question for you was, what do you think comes first, having a morning routine or having a reason for a morning routine?
Well, I want to camp out on the warm up analogy first. I think that's
Yeah.
such a great line. Like you said, it's like getting the chili hot, it's getting some blood flowing, and then it gets into very specific things to do. But also, just like if you don't get your morning routine in, you shouldn't throw the day away. If you don't get your warm up in, you shouldn't throw the training away either. So I mean, that's such a great analogy, I think, and it connects really for me as someone that likes to train and do that. So that said, along with that same kind of warm up, idea is that if you don't get the warm up in, you should still train. But that doesn't mean you should never get the warm up in. Meaning, if you don't get your morning routine in, you still need to go through the day, but you should have a morning routine as you enter into the day. That should just kind of be part of it. As far as like, are you looking for maybe kind of one of my tools or one of the things that I'm kind of consistent with in terms of my morning routine? Or
I guess more so like, have you always, maybe a better question, have you always had a morning routine in part one? And then part two, well, let's just leave it at that. Have you always had a morning routine, or is this more something recent, and why yes or no?
No, like I fantasize about having a morning routine. I fantasize about waking up, doing the same thing, like flipping the coffee switch, going out and letting the chickens out, collecting eggs, feeding the dog. Like I fantasize about that being my everyday. I will say that today, that's most days. That's like a normal morning, but it's not every day. And as much as I want that, I'm also glad that it's not the same thing every single day. And I think that to answer your question, early on, I did not have a morning routine. It was get up and then just get into the day. There was not really direction, but part of that too was because so much was already predetermined. And I think that's pretty normal when you're younger, right? You got school, it's wake up, eat some breakfast, go to school, come back from school, eat a dinner, go to soccer practice or whatever it is, come home and sleep. And that was it was when you're younger, it's predetermined for you. When you get into high school, maybe there's some flexibility, but even then, like I was playing sports. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was at the gym at 6. So the routine was, if there was any routine, it was set for me until I got to college. But lo and behold, I had morning weightlifting again. So that routine is kind of set for you. I think that once I got out of sports, I didn't have a 6 a.m. job, and I never had a true 9 to 5, 40-hour-a-week job until I was maybe 26. Found out that later looking back, that was a depressing time for me, and realized I will never go back to that. So the one time that I had a true morning routine set, you wake up at 7, you drive to work at 7:30. When I had that, I realized I hated it. So it wasn't for me. And I think there's some people out there, I know there's people in my lives that love that comfort. It is very comfortable for them to wake up and know that they have a job to go to, know that they have a purpose and a task to complete, come home, and then they're good. I need routine, but I also need some variability and some chaos within that. And I say that jokingly. I don't want people to think wow, this guy's pretty unstable. But I like new or challenging or different. But I also know that there is value in the routine. So I have not always had a morning routine.
I think it's more about an element of ownership or control over your time versus chaos, or is that, do you like the randomness?
I like a little bit of randomness because it's a problem to solve, right? Where I'm not doing the same thing over and over, where it's okay, I'm walking out, I'm opening up the chicken coop, I'm getting the eggs, I'm feeding the dog. I like a little surprise. So when a bear is up in my tree, I go, sweet, I get to now figure out how to get this bear out of the tree or to keep an eye on it so that I can go about my day and do my things. I mean, a week ago, I had a bear.
That's a real thing. He sent me the picture. I can attest.
Yeah. But I mean, so we've had a bear coming around, and that's the cool part about wildlife is it's definitely frustrating at times, but it causes you to constantly stay engaged and problem solve. So whether that's with trying to keep predators out of the hen house, whether that's trying to keep, all the rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks and deer out of the garden, those are frustrating and it makes you mad sometimes, but I also enjoy that problem solving piece. So
Yeah.
now, as kind of to answer your question, haven't always had a morning routine. I have a morning routine now, but I don't. There are days that I don't get my warm up in before I train, and I kind of like that.
But you like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think as I'm saying this, not doing that routine because I know that it's good and I fantasize about it and I like it. Not doing it from time to time makes me appreciate it that much more. And that's also something that I found to be quite challenging with working from home, my wife being stay at home and my kids being homeschooled. We're at home every single day. So I think I do think I value my time with them. But when I go work with the firefighters and I'm gone for a day or two, or I'm, back for graduation, or I'm off for work and I got to be gone for a couple of days, man, when I come home, oh, it is different. Like, it is a different experience for the first 3 days that I'm back, at least, where it's, I love you, come here, like, let's hang out. There's no phone, there's no computer, there's like, that is my world. And that's not necessarily reality because the work still has to get done and these things. But when I step away from something, and I think maybe I'm having an aha moment, stepping away makes me realize how much I appreciate the things that I have. And it's in a controlled way. I'm not losing something. I'm just stepping aside for a moment and coming back to go, and that's what a vacation is, right? Is you go and you grind at work and then you go on this vacation to go, oh, that's why I'm working. It's to have some money to be able to go and do this fun thing. Now, hopefully you enjoy your work a little bit more and it's not torturous, but I think maybe that's kind of the concept. And for me personally, that's kind of where I land. What's up with you?
It seems so much like, I mean, you hear people fantasize about the idea of retirement being, sitting on a beach, sipping a drink or whatever. And it's like, I've heard Jordan Peterson say, really, that's what you want? Like, how long is that going to last? By day 4, is that really what you want to keep doing? And right. It's very much kind of in line with what you're mentioning of, little breaks here and there are great. And they help us rejuvenate and remember what's important. But I mean, we're built to work, and like we get a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction out of the work that we're doing. And I think that is probably a segue into what a big part of the underlying piece of a morning routine for me is not only preparing for work, but also understanding that I in the experimentation I've done with my morning routine, one of the biggest benefits I get from it is that it gives me time to focus and set aside some specific time for the goals that me and my family are trying to pursue that aren't somebody else's goals, right? If you're in a traditional, let's call it the 9-to-5 job, your time is going to someone else's dream. In almost every case there, right? You're an employee working to build someone else's dream. Maybe there's variations of that might give you more autonomy or an independent contractor type position. Great. But in most cases, I think that's kind of the idea I have, at least, of a 9-to-5. This is somebody else's dream. I'm contributing. I've enjoyed the element or the practice with a morning routine of setting aside time to think about what am I building? Because no one, like we've talked about this before, no one is coming to do this for you, whether it's setting aside money, whether it's your exercise, raising your kids. Those need to be things that you're intentional about. I'm a firm believer in being intentional about those things. And so that's, again, one of the root values of a morning routine for me is this is time for me to focus on trying to build the life I want for me and my family. That's really the biggest thing is having some clarity and quiet time and time to think and write. Again, we'll get into the details here of what this looks like, but that's what drives it. Is this is my time, and I don't want to just wake up, roll out of bed, and rush to work for someone else all day. I really want, and that's, I mean, we've been pretty intentional. We are blessed with the jobs we have, and that they allow some additional flexibility there. But we've also been very intentional about setting that up in such a way that we have some extra time at home, some extra flexibility with what our hours of each day look like. So, yeah, that's I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, other than to say that is the main thing. The main reason I have a morning routine is to be thinking and building towards things that will benefit me and my family long term.
Yeah. So that's kind of the direction that I went when I started looking at, because to pull back the curtain here, we're trying to share with you the benefits we're trying to share what we do as our morning routine, the tools that we use, and then the benefits of those things, and to see what kind of evidence there is. Like, so for me, most of my morning routine is just kind of, this is what I want to do, but why am I drawn towards that? And so we kind of began to look at some of the benefits or purposes of some of those things. So maybe I'll give my tools, or the things that I find most common in my morning routine, which is there's definitely some chores involved, whether that's, again, the chickens or the dogs or the cats or whatever animals, or gardening, making sure that watering took place the night before and the day of, because that's set on an automatic timer. So just kind of like a walk around the property. My first moments of being awake is stepping outside, essentially. Another thing that's in that morning routine most days is going to be training, some type of physical activity, whether that's a hike, a run, weightlifting, a mixture of those things, whatever that may be. So chores, exercise or physical activity, coffee, and then I would say quiet time. And when I'm hitting all four of those, man, life is just a dream. I've never, and that's a thing where I like being busy because it forces me to have this routine. I have to be very intentional. When I have too much freedom, man, I kind of want it. What's real funny is when I have freedom, I end up just kind of sitting around almost.
Yep.
And so it doing those things give me purpose, and they're not those routine or those tools or those things that I'm doing is not for achievement. It's for purpose, I think, really, if I kind of peel that away. So those are kind of the big things that I'm doing on a regular basis. And then looking for ways that I can involve my family into that while still giving myself the time that I need. Because I think that we should bring our children into this to show them what is it like to wake up and have some responsibility, have some routine, but also to spend some time together in the morning before the day gets away from us. Because boy, once 9 o'clock hits, it's like, it just, see you later day.
So, I mean, that's one of the things I was contemplating this week, of the morning routine aspect of, I mean, the assumption would be you do these things because it's how you want your day to go, but also probably because you believe they're good for you. Mm-hmm. So the natural follow-up to that would be, well, if it's good for you, is it not good for your kid or your kids? And should you get them involved, and should they be doing the same thing? So I'm curious, maybe that we're getting to this too soon, I don't know, but it came up. So how do you get your family involved, and what does it look like with kids? I mean, you've got, your kids are 8
and 6.
Yep. 6. So what does that look like around your house with getting your kids involved with your morning routine?
Well, so they're homeschooled, so we don't have an alarm set for them. If they wake up at 6 a.m. and we go, hey, go back to bed, and they're like, no, I'm feeling good. Like, I want to get up and go. Okay. If they wake up at 7 and we go, hey, go back and get some rest. Oh, I'm good. And sometimes we say, go back and get some rest. And they're like, okay. And they crawl back in and they fall asleep for another hour or whatever it is. And then there's days that they'll sleep till 8. And so what I know that I have to do is, they ain't getting up at 5. So if I get up at 5 or if I get up at 6, I have at least an hour of uninterrupted time. So it's my responsibility to get up early enough to, no matter what, it's not going to be disturbed. So I can at least get those essential things in. And of those, the chores take 8 minutes. Making coffee makes 5. The quiet time is really that's what I need the time for. And so that one is an interesting one. That's how I bring the family in. And then also with the training. So my son has been very interested in exercising with us. I have not pushed this on him. Like, when I was younger, it was highly encouraged to play sports and to train and those types of things. And I didn't necessarily have an example of that. My dad wasn't that guy that was up every day at 6 a.m. and would get after it in the gym. There was a period where he did that so that I would, but like, I don't remember ever being really excited to wake up at 6 a.m. and say, hey, let's go train. He is that right now. Yeah. But he's doing that right now. Like, he'll ask me the night before, can I set my alarm? I'm like, buddy, you'll wake up when your body's ready to wake up. Like, don't worry about alarms. You're too young for that crap. Like, don't. You'll have plenty of time in your years to wake up to an alarm. So I basically want you to wake up rested and then passionate about whatever you're going to do when you start the day. So bringing in the family, that's part of the discussion, is the night before, just that conversation of, hey man, if you're ready, your body will let you know that you're ready. So he's been excited about training. He came and trained with us this morning. We did some deadlifts, we did some pull-ups, some cleans, and we sprinted up a hill. And
Can you do a pull-up?
He did body rows. He can do 1.5 pull-ups, but he does body rows. So we're trying to strengthen him up with the supine body rows.
Sweet.
So anyway, he jumped in with us and he's there. So that's huge. Like he's seeing mom and dad train. He's seeing us make it a priority. A buddy of mine comes over and trains with us. So he sees us kind of collaborating and talking and being social and chewing the fat and busting each other's balls and doing the whole thing. And he gets to be a part of that. And then he also gets the physical activity benefits of that. So I think, but anytime, so I'm circling around the question, as far as bringing in the family, very specifically, everything has happened organically. I have not said you need to come train with us or no, you're not allowed to train with us. The biggest challenge has been not that, because that's at 6 a.m. So it's not as consistent. It's the quiet time that happens after that around 6:45, 7 o'clock when I'm done training. And I'll sit there, I'll have my Bible out, I'll have my journal out, and I'm kind of reading through some scripture, or I'm writing, and they'll come out in the middle of that. And my kids in the morning aren't like wild and crazy. They kind of come up and cuddle up on you. So they come and see that, like, I've made this a priority in the morning. They see this as a normal thing for us. And again, it's organic. Like, I'm not waking them up and say, come look at me, I'm journaling, come watch me write, Right. So everything that they've been involved in the morning routine has been just a natural progression. So
how do you balance one of the challenges I encounter with kids and trying to have some quiet time, right? You want and need some of that alone time, quiet, actually, like literal quiet time with thoughts and with reading and journaling and things like that. How do you balance that with kids who come interrupt that? Do you say, hey, I just need to welcome them in? Or do you say, hey, I need 5 more minutes? Or what does that look like?
It's both. Like if it depends on the day. It depends on what I'm reading. It depends on what I'm writing about. But it's all of those things. So I would say it's more dynamic than kind of rigid in that way, where ideally I do want them to sit there and hang out. Like the morning time is my favorite. Nighttime's fun, but with the nighttime, they are fighting sleep. So they're trying to make deals with me. Whereas in the morning, they're just there and they're kind of, it's almost like a second sleep or something, Yep. And so I enjoy that because they're not, my son asks me a million questions at night because he's trying to fight going to bed and wants me to hang out and stuff like that. So then I'm like, buddy, Minecraft is $29. No, you can't buy it yet. Yes, I know it's your money. Yes. Do you want to, and it's just because it's almost like as soon as 10 o'clock hits at 10 a.m., from then on, it's all those like, bam, bam, just repetitive questions. But that there's a nice window in the morning where it's like, there's a calm before the storm, I guess. Yeah. So I play that one by ear and they know now too. I mean, part of that whole thing is that you're having the conversation about it. It's a conversation starter. It's, hey, I need to finish this real quick. And they're seeing that I'm not on my phone. I'm not on my computer. I have this scripture out that for us is a important piece in our daily lives. So they're seeing that, yes, I'm prioritizing something over them, but we're explaining why. Like, I need this so that I can be a good dad for you. But that is shared. It's not just go over in the corner and shut up. This is important. And so that begins the conversation. Does that answer it?
Yeah, for sure. Do you parlay that into them having quiet time, or is it more of the hope that they see you acting this out and living this out and eventually they're going to copy that? How do you handle that?
They tend to, so once we put them down, we've read with them, they'll kind of do some quiet time at night. Logan can read very proficiently and can write his thoughts and they do that in school. Like they journal a lot for school. It'll be, we're learning about birds. They go out and find 5 birds. They draw 2 of their favorite ones and then they write about why it's their favorite. So they're accustomed to kind of experiencing and then marking that experience or journaling that experience. My daughter is getting much more proficient at reading, but she can't read. She's not going to read through a Bible, whereas my son can. So their quiet time is typically they'll do like a Bible show or something like that, where it's the volume's low. They're kind of just laying and chilling and hanging out, and we're able to finish up what we're finishing up, meaning my wife and I. So
okay, you laid out chores, getting outside, training, coffee, quiet time. Is there an order to that, or is it kind of you play that by ear as well?
no, it's definitely so let the dog out, go do the chickens. So the dog's kind of run around doing its morning routine business, its little patrol of the area. And then I'll go and feed the dog. And then we train, quiet time, breakfast, and then work. That's pretty much day to day. What does your day to day look like for that first maybe like 3 hours of being awake?
Yeah, so it's interesting this week, because I mentioned back to school or starting school. It's in flux a little bit, and trying to figure out like, okay, where does this piece fit in that I want? So here are the pieces that I want ideally. Like in my ideal morning, basically wake up, roll out of bed, drink some water, and then go outside for a walk. I like a 20 to 30-minute walk, enjoying some nature. I live in a city. You're lucky enough to be on a farm. Well, not lucky. You set that up. So you earned the farm that you're on. I'm in a city. So it's not quite as much nature, but I'm still outdoors and enjoying some fresh air, and some sunlight. I will get into the details there as well. And then, like I said, this week has changed it up a little bit, but a piece of this and kind of the timing of it is a little different. But unhurried quiet time for reading, journaling, or writing, and then from there it's kind of like, let's jump into the day. So it's basically hydration and walking, some sunlight outdoors with that, quiet time, reading, writing. Those are the pieces that I want in my morning. So I'm curious with your, so where to go next? Let's jump into the physical activity portion, because that's definitely a piece that we both have included. Why do you lift first thing? And do you prefer lifting first thing in the morning, or have you put it there to make sure it gets done, and you'd ideally maybe like it later in the day, or what is that thought process?
Great question. I prefer lifting around 3 o'clock. Like if I had my perfect day, it would be, and this is like specific to training and kind of like health and nutrition. What I find myself the strongest is when I'm sleeping until my body wakes me up, and I'll leave it there. And then kind of going about my day, fasting, maybe having a cup of coffee and drinking some water in the morning. And then fasting until lunchtime between 12 and 1 o'clock, and then training at 3 o'clock is kind of like this, oh baby, I'm ready to get it. And the pump feels better. My joints feel better. My performance feels better. But if I wait till 3, oh, I got an email I got to answer. And then the kids are there. And then it's absolutely, 6 a.m. is not my preferred time. It is not. But it's preferred because it gets done more often than if it was 3 o'clock. And I feel less selfish by training at 6 a.m. versus later in the afternoon at 3. Same for my wife. Like that's something that has become very important for us, is making sure that she's getting her training in, and so am I. And we're able to keep each other accountable in that way, where in the morning it gets done, in the afternoon it's more chaotic. Oh, I got to run to town, or oh, I got to start dinner. And like things just start coming up, which is normal, but it's just easier to prioritize it in the morning. And then the second part is the psychological component of, I've done something hard already today. Like I've sweat, I've been uncomfortable. Everything else is easy now. Like, and if I don't do anything else, I've at least done this. So there's kind of like some psychology to it for me as well.
I like that you guys are doing that together. That's a cool kind of start your day together and do something hard together. Have you guys noticed any like marital benefits from that as far as training together, or is it just like, hey, we both got something done today that we wanted to get done?
I don't know. I mean, what's funny is we asked the question the other day, because we had a intense discussion, and we realized that we're like, wait a second, we're all fired up, and it's not even about us. This topic isn't even about, it has nothing to do with us. Like each other, And then I go, when's the last time we argued? And we both were kind of like, I don't know. and which is a great thing. Now, do we always see eye to eye on every single thing? No, but raised voices and the kind of the quiet treatment or the silent treatment, I can't remember the last time. So, and I think there is something to the training with that. I can't point directly to it, but I think it builds a level of trust between each other, because we're, again, that kind of accountability. We've both suffered the same amount, or we've gone through this together. And then we also collaborate with our training. So my wife played soccer in college and she was very into fitness. And so she switched on. She knows, and I sometimes I'll teach her something as a test before I will do a lecture or something like that. So she hears all this stuff and she understands planes and actions and all these things. And I'm like, you need to teach this course and maybe you'll help us out better. But anyways, so she's pretty switched on to that. So the reason why I say that is we program together. I'm like, hey, this is the template we need to follow. You pick some, I'll pick some. So then it's kind of default conversation that we're having. Usually it's at nighttime when the kids are down on Sunday night, we'll program the week out. And so we know what we're getting ourselves into, and we kind of get to chuckle and laugh at, oh, that one's going to be nasty, or, ooh, that sounds fun, or, hey, we haven't done this in a while. So it encourages conversation, and that's not even the training part. So it does a lot of things by us working out together, although I can't point directly to any specific marital benefit aside from just requiring some additional communication, which we talked about. What was that? A few months back, of how much time a couple spends together each week. And it was like 20 minutes. And I'm like, whoa, that's not me. So I'm not the average when it comes to that part.
I'm going to title this podcast "Work Out with Your Wife and You'll Never Argue Again." So thank you.
Well, let me tell you how good I am.
Do you guys have competing goals at all? Like, as far as like when you program, are you doing the same thing, or what? What does that look like?
Yeah, same movement, same everything. There's modifications for certain things. She's getting her pull-ups back, her strict pull-ups back. So she'll use a light band to get the volume that we need. So there's adjustments that are made. For example, like if I do 8 pull-ups, she'll do 13 or 14 or whatever with the band to get the same volume and kind of that same effect of that amount, but obviously with a little bit less, with an easier, a better movement pattern, if you will, less kind of compensation. So
you mentioned fasting, and I think this may be a good segue. I'm curious, why fasting till noon or so? And then do you want to get into some of the research reasons why you do some of the things the way you do?
Well, to be clear, I don't fast because I train at 6 a.m. So by the time 8 a.m. comes around and the kids are up and they're hungry, I'm like, well, I've been up for 4 hours now at this point. So I'm ready to eat.
Was that your ideal day? You might not eat till noon?
Yeah, that'd be an ideal day because I'm not training until later. With training in the morning, I like to get something post. Now, so the difference there, I guess, is that I don't eat anything pre, and maybe that's kind of that performance piece, is that I don't eat anything before my 6 a.m. training, but I'll eat something after. Whereas if I train at 3 p.m., I'll eat something around 1 o'clock, kind of give myself a little bit of fuel. I'm fully awake and alert and ready. And then I'll eat post that as well. But right now it's fasted, I guess, but not the same way.
Gotcha. Yep. That makes sense. Okay. So regardless, why do you do things the way you do? What are some of the reasons that you've, obviously a lot of the times we look at evidence, various kinds of evidence. So peer review, we look at, evidence from people in the trenches. We look at the needs of the individual. That's kind of the evidence-based triangle, right? Those 3 pieces. So what prompted you to make some of the decisions that you did relative to that morning routine?
Yeah. Again, it's pretty organic. It's kind of like, this is what feels good for me. And then from there, you pose the question of why? And I go, well, because it feels good, but is there any support for that? And so just routine in general and kind of looking at the benefits of that is that there's more cohesion amongst the family when there is routine. So that's kind of the route that I went down. There's some evidence that shows that folks that have a routine, or families that have a routine, perform much better academically as well. And so I find that to be of great value and importance. And I think it just routine gives a sense of security and comfort as well for the individual, as well as the home life as well. Although I like chaos, I don't live a chaotic life. There's things that come up and you have to adapt and whatnot at times, but in general, it alleviates chaos and uncertainty, and that's very comforting for children. And I think that's comforting for a relationship as well. So even if you're single, or rather you're married or even single, it'll bring a level of comfort. And this is in no particular order, but the coffee piece, like you and I have talked about this, and the benefits of caffeine, and there's elements of increased energy. I think that coffee is almost a ritual for me, so when I think of the difference between routine and ritual, I think of routine as being a little bit more rigid, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I think of routine as rigid. This is dinner time, bedtime, going to school, going to work, whereas a ritual is almost more of a reward. These are, birthdays and kind of these type of events that are they're not as frequent per se, but there may be some routine element to it. So the coffee is like this blend between a ritual and routine. I would say it is a ritual that is included in my routine, meaning that when I grind the beans, smell the beans, pour the water in the carafe, get the drip out, and I'm not fancy and have espresso and pour over and all that. It's just a regular 12-cup drip. But that process, that experience is comforting to me because I know that I'm getting into my day. It's kind of letting me know that my day is going. So in addition to the kind of ritual / routine piece of it and the comfort, it's potential for increases in energy, some potential for protecting against, neurodegenerative disorders. I think it's Alzheimer's and Parkinson's specifically that there's been potential benefit there. Improving athletic performance, improving chances for weight management even. And then the idea there, though, is that I have to remind myself of, specifically with coffee, is that more is just more. More isn't always better. So it's also been over the time kind of trying to find that minimal effective dose for me. And then I would recommend that to anyone else. Drinking 12 cups of coffee doesn't mean 12 times the amount of energy from 1 cup of coffee. And in fact, overconsumption could be detrimental, just like anything. So it's really, for me, about finding the minimal effective dose.
But that's, I would say, train, right?
What's that?
That's before you train, though, right?
No, that's after training.
Oh, after. Okay.
Yeah. I'm raw in the morning. It's water. So water's part of my morning routine, but water is the only thing that I would do before
Gotcha.
that. And then as far as exercise in general, I didn't look at anything particularly in the morning or the benefits of morning training, aside from, hey, you got to train. So if the morning is when you train, then that's the benefit of it being in the morning, is that you get it done. But we've, waxed on about how, improvements in muscular health, bone health, just cardiorespiratory health, all the things, right? Increased energy, increased longevity, all the stuff that we've talked about over and over. And maybe you'll drill down on some of those specifically, but just
exercise is good for you. Oh, okay.
Weird. Physical activity is needed. Interesting. Yeah. So for all the no duh, I guess, benefits of that. And again, we can drill down into that more specifically, but in all honesty, a lot of it too is aesthetics. Like, I want to look and feel good. It's not just to strengthen my muscles. It's not just to increase my bone density. It's because I don't want to look frumpy, basically. Like, I'll admit it. I'm trying to look decent. Number two, it's my job. Like, I feel like I owe it to my profession to be in a respectable amount of shape. Like, and I just want to be able to do anything at any time if needed. And then finally, just the kind of family involvement piece, the benefits there, like I alluded to in the beginning, is that routine in general will bring comfort and that security to a family. And also, again, there was some discussion about behavior as well, about having a routine, and within that routine, having a cohesive family is also an important piece. So if you look at it as chaos, routine, and then an intact family versus a detached family, the trifecta is routine, intact family, and that will give you those benefits of the behavior and those types of things.
Do you notice if you guys miss days, or if you're traveling, does it have an effect that you notice on your kids specifically, or their behavior? which is tough
because it's so
when you mention days,
rare.
it's usually like for a trip or vacation or something.
Yeah,
So
like if we change the routine, we're usually all on it. So it's not like it, but there are times, you know, so I'll go work with firefighters and I'm gone for, you know, let's say a couple days. And yeah, I mean, when I come back, Dad, you're home, you know. I think because they're used to that routine, breaking the routine makes them understand and appreciate the value of the routine, I think.
Yeah.
And it does for me as well. Like I come home going, I've missed you guys like you wouldn't believe. But when you see them every day and you're around them every day, it's not that you don't miss them or don't love them. It's just absence makes the heart grow fonder, I guess. And you know, there's some version of that.
Nice.
So what you do?
So I was kind of thinking through as we've both crafted our morning routines. And like I said, this week, mine is a little bit in flux of kind of different timing of different things. And it also makes me think, what are the things that I absolutely have to have or really want to make sure I hit every single day? And then from there, it's also kind of what is the key determinant of a good morning? And I don't know about you, but for me, if there's one thing that I have to have for a good morning, it's actually happens the night before. It's good sleep. And so that's one of the things that I think can be, I don't know if it's overlooked, but one of the things I always need to make sure I focus on to have a good morning routine is to make sure I'm in bed at the right time the night before and sleeping at least 7 hours. That's the minimum for me. My target is 8, and there's plenty of research. I would direct the listener to Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. Yeah. He's done a number of podcasts, you know, illuminating the research that he's done. But I think it's very interesting to look at. You always hear, oh, you should get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and everyone's like, oh, 7? I heard 7.
Yeah, yeah.
because of the way we are so busy, and a lot of times, you know, most people probably work a 9-to-5 job. I don't know what the numbers are, but on average, most people are getting up in the morning. Kids are going to school. They're going to work. It's a pretty rushed time, and at least for me, historically, that's always been, you know, you heard 7 or 8 hours of sleep. You've heard that forever. But for me, in seeing some of the differences actually in less than 8 hours from a research perspective was pretty eye-opening to say, oh, it's really ideally 8 or more. Like you should be targeting 8. And so that's been a change that I've made. I don't know. I want to say for at least a couple of years now of really targeting 8 hours is the target, not 7. Because if you target 7, oftentimes you're going to be 6 something. If you target 8, maybe you're slipping down into 7.5. But I can function really well on 7.5 to 8 versus 6.5 to 7.
Would you say that you can tell a difference between, based on your sleep, you can tell a difference between being busy and being productive? Because you think, oh, if I sleep more, then I have less time to be productive. But if you have less sleep, are you really productive or are you just more busy? Is there anything to that for you?
Maybe not in those exact terms, but I know what you mean. And I would say, yeah, for sure. It changes how I interpret my day. Even if the activities are exactly the same, the internal environment is much different. And, you know, there's, without going through a laundry list of the research benefits, there's a ton on how kids behave in school, on mood, right? Anxiety, your interpretation of that, the way your physiology responds to carbohydrates or to calories in general. Yep. Everything changes when you don't sleep enough. For people, it's going to look different whether you function perfectly on 7 or perfectly on 9, or, you know, some people say they function well on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. The research would say those who function well on less than 7 is extremely small. So if you think you function well on less than 7, you probably don't. So try 8, see what happens. And I mean, that's one of the other difficulties with sleep, and our interpretation of that is not to be trusted, right? It's like I can sit in front of a computer all the way up to bedtime and go to sleep and feel like I slept 8 hours or had 8 hours of sleep opportunity in bed. Maybe I feel okay the next day. Research says even if you feel okay, you're probably, you know, suboptimal. There are things that you're having these little micro wake ups or interruptions of the different sleep cycles at night that result in decreased performance the next day. You look at athletic performance goes down, injury goes up. There's a host of, there's tons of issues out there with sleep. So that's number one for me. Is
real quick, since we're on that topic, Any discussion on sleep timing? I know some variability here, like go to bed when the sun goes down, wake up when the sun comes up, live like a farmer, not a vampire, that whole concept. Anything that you can touch on real quick that you came across while on the subject of sleep, meaning that you might have a college student who's like, yeah, I go to bed at 2 a.m. and I wake up at 10, I got my 8 hours. Well, okay, that's good. But can we start paring that back? Any comment on that at least?
The one thing I can say, from a research perspective, is that there do seem to be different what they call chronotypes, where there are kind of the night owls and there are the early birds. That's a real research supported phenomenon. And so I would say it would help to identify which one you are. There are the kind of, we'll get into light. I think one of the things I'll touch on here is sunlight, and the importance of light is the number one determinant of our circadian rhythms. So when you start getting sleepy, like there's a hormonal response based on light. So when you start viewing light in the morning dictates when you start getting sleepy at night. So yes, there are differences in night owls versus early birds. Some of that can be manipulated by what time you're waking up and viewing sunlight or other bright artificial light. But I think that would probably leave it at about that. I think there is a reason that the sun goes down and comes up when it does, and humans have been following that for as long as we've been here for a reason. Our bodies respond hormonally to light, and specifically the sun. And I would say don't overcomplicate that, right? I mean, not to you, but to the listener, there's a reason for that, and there's good reasons for it that are supported in science as well. So, and
I would pause and add one more thing is, make sure that you're not convincing yourself that you're a night owl. For example, for years, I convinced myself that I was a night owl, but I also was playing video games or watching movies, and that's what kept me up late. And I would say, I don't like waking up in the morning. Well, I wonder why, dude. And now that I wake up at 5 a.m. with the chickens because they're letting me know they're awake, I'm awake and it feels good and it makes me go to bed sooner. So don't convince yourself of something, because I wonder, and I haven't seen the research on this, if the disparity between a person that can survive on 5 hours but we should be getting 8, if that small group is so the majority should get 8, there's a small group that can get 5 or 6. Is that same disparity with we should go to bed when the sun goes down and when it comes up versus I can go to bed at 6 a.m. and wake up at 2 p.m. and I'm fine? I wonder if that disparity is similar or not. I know that's real. My dad's that guy that can kind of, he's got a weird sleep schedule, for example, but I don't know if that's self-induced or if that's more of a natural thing. So anyways.
Humans are incredibly resilient and adaptive. Sure. We can survive on a lot less than ideal.
Yeah.
But if you get under the hood a little bit and look at what's happening physiologically, that's when you start seeing, oh, just because you survive doesn't mean you're thriving, type of thing.
Correct.
And there's plenty of research out there on shift work and the havoc that wreaks on.
Oh, the firefighter, all the firefighter stuff, man. Yeah. So real quick, I think it's an important point you're saying here. Gotta sleep. And if you're someone that likes to play video games until the wee hours in the morning, then make sure you're getting your sleep. And if you have a job, then you got to go to bed a little bit sooner, or we're encouraging that. So sleep is number one to get into a healthy routine or to get you into your day to start. So go from there.
And I don't know about you, but I mean, if I don't get enough sleep, for me, it's 7.5 to 8 is what that's the minimum is 7.5, or else I notice that I'm not optimal. I don't want to do my morning routine when I'm creaking out of bed and like, oh, that came way too early. I don't want to get up and go walk. I don't want to do any of that.
The desire for discipline is diminished for sure, especially with my physical activity and wanting to go get out, like you said, but also my nutrition choices. I find myself way more lax in my nutrition decisions. So
which is funny for those things alone. Yeah, there's research support for if you are not sleeping enough, you make worse choices nutritionally, and your body does worse with that. So I talk about like carbohydrate, like your insulin sensitivity is all out of whack. So what you can do with the food that you take in, which has already been compromised, and the choices that you make about that food it's a double whammy. So again, go read Matthew Walker's book. Go
sleep, people.
Go sleep.
Yeah, maybe that's what we need next. Is I know we've both read it, but we need to review it or something like that. It's great.
It's a really interesting book. So
yeah,
highly encourage that one. So anyway, so sleep, again, that's the foundation for me is making sure I'm sleeping and getting to bed on time. That's for me, the key of good sleep is getting to bed on time. So making sure I'm kind of following a structured plan the night before is the start of my morning routine. So the other thing I mentioned was light viewing and how that influences our circadian rhythms and kind of our natural biology. Again, hopefully this is well known by now, but for those maybe if this is new, you want to avoid bright lights before bedtime, at least an hour and a half before bed. That means, if you have to, so there's a couple interesting things here. If you have to look at a screen, get a screen dimmer and a blue light filter on your computer. There's a program called f.lux that I use that I'm not sure if it's Mac specific, but I have a Mac. That's one of the things I use that shuts off the blue light spectrum from your computer if you're on a screen later at night. Ideally avoid it, entirely, at least a couple hours or hour and a half before bed. One of the other hacks that's kind of been talked about recently that you can use that has an influence, a partial influence to if you know you're going to be viewing a screen late at night, one of the things that appears to help with that is to make sure you're out in the sunlight as the sun is starting to go down. So as the sun is lower towards the horizon in the evening hours, viewing or being outside in that sunlight actually has a beneficial hormonal effect on when melatonin is released and your ability to deal with some of that later evening light. So again, if you have to look at a screen, try to get outside for an extended period of time in those evening hours. In the morning, we want to get as much bright light as possible to force that alertness cycle, the hormonal cycle with cortisol as that spikes in the morning. Getting bright light, sunlight, ideally in the morning is optimal. There is some research that looks at different kinds of artificial light in the morning as being a potential substitute, as long as it includes a big piece of that bright white, not a warm white, but bright white and maybe even some blue light. The white is the key, though. The bright white light illumination is the one thing that seems to be better at suppressing melatonin, for example, and helping with that alertness phase in the morning. So you talk about the importance of light for circadian rhythm, but it also is important for mood and alertness in the morning as well. So the easiest answer is get outside. And that kind of pairs in with this idea of physical activity that we've both mentioned, of the importance of moving first thing in the morning. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, that as much as I hate it, there's something to that thing of just being like, I don't like it, but it's done and I'm set for the day. And I don't have a gym. I train outside. So, and that's when the winter months come around, it's a lot harder to want to get out there when it's 22 degrees and you're grabbing a cold barbell with some steel plates. It's not so fun. So yeah.
Do you guys train outdoors through the winter?
Yeah.
Whew. Man, look at you.
But that's when it tends to be later in the day. But our chores and responsibilities are also less in the winter too. So we've really found the reality of kind of seasonal living, I guess, if you will, both in food, in lifestyle, and all the above. Because I don't do it like in the summer months, I find myself doing outside work in the morning and then my work in the afternoon. Whereas in the winter, I do my work in the morning and my outside stuff in the afternoon because it's warmed up, the sun's out, and all that stuff. So anyways.
Yeah. Just a couple, before I transition into the walking phase, a couple of just additional points to mention on the light portion. So a couple things I was reading through some of the research, and interestingly, bright light viewing is actually one of the ways people can treat seasonal affective disorder, but also PTSD. So again, going back to the idea of mood, there's some interesting stuff there with the effect that light has not only on our ability to go to bed on time, wake up on time, but certainly how we feel about the day. Also, sunlight is better than a traditional alarm at inducing alertness and awakeness. So you mentioned you and your kids don't wake up to an alarm, but kind of wake up when the body tells you to.
Again, I do for training days, to be fair.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah.
That's one of the things, one of the tools I want to get into. Well, I can mention this now. I haven't actually used this yet, but one of the things that I was digging around for specific tools to be using is this thing called a SwitchBot, and it's a smart curtain system. It's just a device that you can put on a curtain rod, and you can program it so that, for example, like if I prefer, and it's research supports sleeping in a very dark and cool environment,
cool place. Yeah.
But one of the things that helps us wake up is as the sun begins rising and before the sun is actually up, there's more light, ambient light in the environment. Again, there's a reason for that slow, gradual increase of light. And if you're in a cave, right? If I kind of turn my room into a cave at night, is that it's dark and cool. That is a piece of that waking up on time portion that I would like to start including more so I'm not as reliant on an alarm. So that there is some slow, gradual increase of ambient light in the morning. And this is one of the ways in which you can, there's so many cool smart gadgets out there now that will help with this. This is just a device. You don't have to get a whole smart curtain system, but just a device you can put on the curtain rod that will actually start opening the curtains if you have curtains. And, you can program it for a certain time. But again, the point being, our physiology tends to respond better to sunlight as a means of changing the hormonal response and starting that wake up process versus a harsh alarm system that tries to pull you out of a deep, dark sleep in the morning. And that's, again, no duh. Like, no one likes the sound of an alarm waking up. That's why so many people hit the snooze button, is because that's a brutal way to wake up.
But what about a chicken in the morning? The rooster. That's like an alarm, kind of. It's a nature alarm. I don't know.
A natural alarm. Yeah.
Is that like white noise except bugs and the breeze at night? Like, I wonder if there's something different. It's because it's violent in the morning for sure. It's there. But anyways.
But what are they responding to? I mean, I don't know, but I would assume that there's some biological responses within them as well to start that process. And again, similar to humans have lived with sunlight going up and down forever. We've also had chickens around for quite a long time, and the noise of animals waking us up is kind of a part of that process as well.
Yep.
So then the last thing, circling back to the evening light viewing, one other note to throw in there, the reasons for that, it's again relating to hormonal issues. So evening light viewing actually delays the release of melatonin. So even if you fall asleep on time, there's a shift that happens. So you could say, hey, I fell asleep when I normally do, so why should I stop looking at my screen? The cycles of when melatonin is released, when the REM cycles start, everything gets shifted. And if there's a shift, so if you go to bed at 11 o'clock and wake up at 7, but your cycles are shifted by an hour or two in that process, you're getting at least one less REM cycle in your sleep. And so that's where the damage or the problem lies, is those cycles are that's the regenerative sleep cycle that we need. Is the more of those cycles you get, that's where those processes of memory consolidation and regenerative restorative type stuff happens.
Now for that, this is not a trick question. I'm baiting you a little bit here. Well, I take melatonin before I go to bed, so I have melatonin readily available. Have you read into melatonin? And then have you also heard some of the stuff that Huberman's been talking about with melatonin? And would you feel comfortable speaking about some of that?
So not as much. And basically it just, I would echo kind of what you mentioned, of that there seems to be a preference, at least right now. And I don't know the research here, so I'll leave it at this, but there seems to be a preference amongst some for magnesium threonate, magnesium glycinate over melatonin. And
and zinc, right?
Anecdotal is there seems to be some influence with the pituitary gland there. That's about as much as I can say to it, other than I would want to research that more before speaking any further on that. That's just anecdotal.
And if it would motivate you to hear it, from what I remember, there's a stifling of testosterone production as well, I believe, with a large consumption of melatonin. I might not be right, but hopefully that motivates the listener to go and fact check that. But I too will look into that. But I want to say I too haven't dove into it, but I remember there being something like that, and it kind of making me go, oh, but I've never been a melatonin consumer, so it didn't affect me the same way. But I want to say that there was some potential challenges with production there, so it might motivate you to go take a look at that.
And that could have been the tie-in with the pituitary gland. I'm not exactly sure, but that's and I like, to be fair, I have seen some research that reports the benefits of melatonin as well. So that's something we'll look into. That could be one of the things that we look into.
Trying like sleep is something that we need to,
if trying melatonin versus a magnesium supplementation of some kind. So I'll leave it at that for there. So the next piece that I wanted to touch on briefly is the physical exercise. For me, this is walking. I So I prefer, like you, lifting later in the day, afternoon time. Usually for me, it's around 5 o'clock. Again, based on our schedules here in our family.
Mhm.
As far as ideal lifting time, I'm trying to think. It's changed so much, through college. I was always, I would lift at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, sometimes 9 o'clock, but I would go to
Mhm.
bed way later because I was an idiot.
Right.
I tend to like some days it's like after lunch, like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if I'm feeling really
Mhm.
good. Sometimes that's a really good time. But usually, I mean, very general ballpark afternoon, sometime between 1 and 5 o'clock is my preferred time to lift.
Mhm.
But I will say one of the things I like, one of the reasons I like, or several of the reasons why I like walking so much in the morning. It's a great chance to get out and get that sunlight, right? That morning
Mhm.
sunlight. You look at some of the different research on timing of viewing sunlight, and depending on where you live, right? If depending on how far north or south you might be, or how cloudy it is or overcast, can influence how much time you should be spending in light. But if you go for a 20 to 30-minute walk, regardless of your climate or geography or the weather that day, that seems to be enough sunlight viewing to have the desired effect. So for me,
Mhm.
it's killing two birds with one stone. It's a great way to get some movement. So we know that movement elevates core temperature, which helps with alertness. We know that movement, again, no duh. Like is walking good for you? What a
Yeah.
shocker, right? We all know the lifelong benefits of step counts, of just moderate
Mhm.
physical activity, reduce disease long term, no doubt. But the other thing I would throw in there is, if you look at our anatomy, one of the things that has, I would say, almost convicted me in the last 5-10 years about the importance of walking is, look at our anatomy. We are upright
Mhm.
bipedal creatures who are designed to walk. That's how we move. Now you look at,
Mhm.
ancestrally, walking is a huge part of how humans get food, get shelter, get water, whatever else. Yes, higher intensities may have some different effects that could, we could argue those are better effects. One of the things that I did my dissertation on was looking at the effects of different types of exercise on cognition and academic achievement. So if you look at the mental benefits of movement, there's an inverse or inverted U. So there's basically, like, if you're too low intensity or too high intensity, the result is not as good. There's kind of a
Mhm.
sweet spot in the middle where it's typically moderate exercise that generates the most benefits for us cognitively. So the brain derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, is one of the main things that we look at from a research perspective with physical activity or exercise. And it seems to be moderate exercise. Most of the research is on aerobic exercise, but one of the
Mhm.
things I wanted to include and did include in my studies was resistance exercise. And there's some interesting differences between those two that would tell us resistance exercise can have some great effects cognitively as well.
And a
But
quick
again,
break there. Can
yeah,
you explain what low, moderate, and higher intensity might look like for context? Just so that, because we hear that high intensity interval training or steady state cardio, like, is there some just very basic examples that, of course, people can kind of, you know, just giving some people a frame of reference, like walking might be on the low intensity side, and you may need to not walk jog, but walk at a pace of X, or walk a distance of X, or have a heart rate of X. Is there a way that people know that they're in that moderate training range?
so you need to get hooked up to a gas mask and do
A
VO2,
metabolic cart? Mm-hmm.
making sure you're taking your metabolic cart with you, and
Sure.
you want to be 65 to
Yeah.
80%
Yeah.
of your VO2 max. So
Yeah. But
there,
in general,
yeah, in general. So the ballpark that I would say moderate exercise typically is in that 65 to 80%. Now, whether you're looking at heart rate or VO2 max, it's gonna shift a little bit, but in that's the moderate window, is kind of 65 to 80% of, generally speaking. Heart rate max is an easy way to figure that out. You could also use like a talk test. That's
mm-hmm.
another easy way.
Yep.
If you don't want to include technology or measurement of any kind, a talk test is an easy way of doing that, of making sure you can carry on a conversation, is a fairly good ballpark for moderate, kind of the upper end of moderate exercise
Mm-hmm.
intensity. I'm not sure if you have other pieces you want to add in on exercise intensity there and how to define
Like,
moderate.
yeah, I mean, I think that the talk test is a little bit harder with weightlifting because,
Yeah.
so with the talk test for like a cardiorespiratory measure, I would say is great. But then for something like weightlifting, that one's a little bit harder to measure with kind of like the eyeball test, but I know it when you see it. If you're like,
RPE can be.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So like, and so what would a moderate RPE? So let's say the scale, we use the scale of 1 to 10. There's also scales that go into the 20s, and there's
6 to 20 scale is.
yeah, I don't understand why, but let's say it's 1 to 10, 10 being a max, 1 being like you're sitting on a couch. I wouldn't necessarily say that 5 in the middle is actual moderate weightlifting or moderate intensity. I would say a more moderate intensity would probably be closer to 7 or about 7. So
Yep.
meaning that you got way more left in the tank, but you've definitely done some work. So this is, and like a rep range with a moderate weight might be what, 8 to 15 reps, somewhere in there is kind of a, maybe even 10 to 15 reps would probably be a safer bet for moderate. When you get down to 8 and you're in that range, it might be getting a little bit more on the heavy side, or the intensity may increase. So just some general frame of reference for those of you that are like, well, what exactly is moderate? And then, or I do moderate and we just said that, and you're like, well, that wasn't moderate then, I guess, you know.
Yep. There's always going to be a little individual variability there, but
yeah,
that's again, so for me, it's a walking exercise in the morning. It's not really for the exercise portion of it, although I can spout out some of the research benefits of that, but it's for me, if I can choose the exercise intensity, and maybe research says I should be doing a higher intensity, but for me, another big piece of that reason why I'm walking is for the thinking portion. So the walk for me is I'm getting sunlight, I'm exercising, increasing core temperature, getting some brain drive neurotrophic factor, blah, blah, blah. The real reason I'm doing it is because it's a great way to practice gratitude. That's one of the main things I'm focused on. I've got a loop that I do on the way out and the way back. On the way out, and this is another good, I think, practice of kind of the practice of trying to be more aware of your thoughts and where your thoughts are going, for me, is an important thing. And so my whole goal on the way out is gratitude. It's kind of a prayer gratitude type of thing where I'm trying to just, that's all I'm focused on, is trying to keep my thoughts in that space of being grateful, of trying to identify some things I'm grateful for, kind of pray through a few things with family. And then on the way back, it's more open to almost more selfish time where I can think about some of the things that I want to accomplish in the day. But again, the whole picture would be, the reason I like walking and not a higher intensity is because I can have that clarity of thought during that time that gets interrupted a little bit more for me when I'm at a higher intensity and just trying to get through it.
And a good piece, I think, to take away from this is, regardless of your religious affiliation or your spiritual beliefs or whatever, wherever you're at with any of that, as a human being living in society, having a period of gratitude, of thanksgiving, is paramount. So we're not here to tell you need to believe this way, because like that, it has nothing to do with that. At the end of the day, regardless of who you are, give thanks, and you will find that over time that will bring you some peace and comfort and appreciation in general. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there. If that is not a normal practice for you, man, gratitude and thankfulness is huge.
And I will say, this is by no means trying to toot my own horn, but that is, I would say, that is one of the things I try to, and we talk about the idea of kind of getting our kids involved in this. That is one of the things that I really have made an effort to try to incorporate my older son into, is identifying one thing that you're grateful for in the morning. So sometimes he comes on walks with me, most of the time not now. I'll leave it at that. Sometimes that's better that he doesn't. Quiet moments. But I usually take our younger son in the stroller, and so I'm usually walking him, and he's only a year and a half, so he's not sitting there chattering. But that, on our way to school, or when I hug my older son in the first thing in the morning, I usually try to take him. So, like, for example, this morning I took him outside. We stood there and looked at the sunrise and said, "Hey, what a beautiful sunrise! What are you thankful for?" And that's, again, one thing I want to try to incorporate into their mornings is that practice of, gosh, this is a beautiful morning.
We're alive.
Breathe it in. Yeah, man. Like,
we got shelter over our head. We're safe. And man, what a blessing.
Even though I know they're not they don't realize that yet. Or
no.
he hasn't seen the other side of what else could be out there.
No.
But I still think it's an important thing to start that practice early.
But would you say that by practicing that is a way to learn it without having to know the other way? Because I don't want to, we're in the middle of reading a book right now about toughness and doing challenging things. I'm not going to make my kid, sleep outside by himself with no shelter to understand and appreciate a shelter. Now, you can fabricate and control some of those things, like camping outside, like foraging for sticks and using paracord to make shelters and these types of things, which is another topic. But I think equally, without throwing them to the wolves at such a young age, this is a way to plant the seed of appreciation, knowing that there is something else. And I'm thankful that this is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And I don't think they need to realize all of the reasons why we might be doing what we're doing at the ages that our kids are, but it lays that foundation that maybe later down the road we talk about some of this in more detail.
You can refer back. Remember,
has been established.
Yep, for sure.
Because previously I've mentioned this as well, like kind of what you were saying about your quiet time. Your kids are seeing you do that, and they're watching. They see what we do.
They see it all, buddy.
They will copy, good and bad. So. Yeah, it's a big part of that. So that's kind of the other piece. So again, this is where things are shifting a little bit for us with school schedule and things like that. But the other piece that I really like and have found a tremendous amount of value in is writing. And I know that's something that you've mentioned as well. With you've made an effort to journal. So I'm going to flip this back over to you and let's talk writing, because I think that's something that we're both discovering as to be a really powerful tool for the morning. So what do you do when you're writing? Are you writing about anything in particular? How long are you writing? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I don't put rules on that because if I do, then the routine gets to more of the rigid side. And once things start to get rigid for me, I feel like I'm put in a box. I feel like I can't move. And then I feel like there's less creativity. I feel like if I don't do it, then I'm a failure. So I try to it's kind of like a training template, right? Here's a template. I need to push, pull in the lower half. I need a step, lunge, and hinge. I need to, so I have these certain things that I need to do. So the big picture is to journal. Some days it's about the book that I'm reading. Some days it's about the scripture I read. Some days it's about the things that I'm thankful for. So that's where I do a lot of my gratitude. And that's what's really been cool, is to look back at that and mark time, because I'll write things that I'm struggling with, or that I'm praying about, or that I'm praying for others about, right? And there's so many people that go, oh, I'm in this tough time, and you write those things down, and then you go back and you look at a journal from a year ago and go, oh wow, like that happened. You know what I mean? So it's cool to be able to mark time in that way. So I don't have rules on how I journal, on what I journal. I'm not opposed to maybe having a day to where I go, like, this day I want to try to, I'll use a day to kind of experiment with something. But in general, it's not that rigid. It's kind of just the practice of journaling. And that I did not look into. I didn't look into the routine of journaling and the benefits of that. I've just found anecdotally for me that it's a great practice. I don't like writing, and I don't like reading for that matter. I'm definitely more of a talker and more of a visual. I enjoy the visual and hands-on and those types of things more so than reading and writing. So it's also a discipline of a skill that otherwise would literally go to waste. I would, once doc school was done and I didn't have to write discussion boards and papers and stuff, good luck, man. I'm out. I did my time. I'm free, so it is a good practice to continue that on, because when I look back at the doctoral process, and I remember one of our colleagues sharing this with me, our dean, he was like, it has nothing to do with the school. Like, it has nothing to do with the knowledge. It's the experience. And I think, and everyone's experience is different. And for me, it was, you're going to do this thing that you don't really like that much, and you're going to learn to love it because you got to do it. And I actually enjoyed writing, but now that I'm not accountable to anyone, I don't just sit and write papers or, large amounts of information. But this is kind of that effort of, it's not my favorite thing to do, but it's important for me because I don't like it. And so I don't want to make it too rigid to where if I don't do it, then I failed. but I also know that I need to do something, I guess.
So if you don't enjoy it, what benefits have you gotten from that?
Well, I don't like exercising all that much either. I hate squatting heavy. It's uncomfortable, man. My mobility ain't the greatest. I'm tall. It's uncomfortable. Like, I don't like it, but what I like is the result from it. I like that I'm doing something consistently. I like the way I look training wise, and I like the way I feel after writing. So yeah.
Have you so one question is, so you don't put rules on it. Do you have a specific length of time you write, or is it kind of like a gut feeling like, oh, I've written enough, I'm done?
I've written a bullet point and been just like, thank you for sitting me down and making me, like, I've literally written, thank you for just like, I'm almost like saying, I'm having a conversation with myself. And that's the other thing too, is sometimes it's bullet points, sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes it's pages, sometimes I'm writing to myself, sometimes I'm writing into the ether, sometimes sometimes I'm writing a letter, sometimes my journal will be a letter to my wife. It's so varied, and there's no system to when those things take place. But literally, I've had times, and it's been more than once, where I have wrote, thank you for sitting down and taking the time to write this sentence. And that's it, man. Because instead of going, oh, I have to do emails and I have work and I have all these things to do, and instead of letting that take over this quiet time, I beat it. I beat the desire to be busy, and I overcame it. As short as it was a victory. So, I mean, that's definitely not the norm. That is very, very rare for that style to take place, but it was a win for me. So yeah, I won.
Almost just like you said, doing something hard, maybe even if it's just for the sake of doing something hard, there's benefit there.
And I don't want to like, here's the thing though, and I don't want people to misunderstand that you can't use that excuse all the time. But like, I don't expect you to go and max out your lift every day. I don't expect you to eat perfect every day. I don't expect you to run 50 miles every day. I don't expect you to go and do a crazy amount of manual labor every day. Like, I don't expect that. But so there's going to be those days that you don't want to, that you need to do it. But that shouldn't be your daily either. So like, just making sure that
is that almost the reason for keeping it so unstructured, is so that you don't have to follow so many rules every single day. It makes it easier for you. Like, that's the hack for making sure you do it every day, is leave it open.
And then if I do it, I'm like, I did it. Sweet. Yeah. Like, I'm more inclined, if you tell me that I have a mountain in front of me just for my journaling, like this thing that's supposed to be enjoyable and supposed to set my intention for the day, but I also have all this other work to do, I mean, I might not do it. Or if I do it, it'll be half-assed. And then I'm thinking about not doing that well in the morning. And I'm going to take that into the day, rather than, hey, it wasn't necessarily what I could have done, but I did it today. And then tomorrow, let's make it better. Or the next time I do it, let's make it better. And that kind of keeps me coming back for more, that I'm never failing. And then
for success.
Yeah, I'm never failing, but I'm also honest enough with myself to be like, that was weak, bro. Like, you need to prioritize this better tomorrow. And then it also makes me reflect, why was I so brief today? Did I get my sleep? Did I wake up on time? Did I get my other things done? And so for me personally, have enjoyed that process and experience a lot more, because when I do it, I know it's because I wanted to, and I chose to do it, rather than just kind of a checking of the box, even though it was a checking of the box in the sense of a short writing time or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, one of the biggest benefits for me in writing is clarity of thought. Mm-hmm. Do you use it for a similar fashion at all, to kind of write through anything that you're struggling through or try and think about, or is it more kind of okay.
Yeah. So that's like that. Hey, this thing, I mean, I was sharing with you before we got on, like, some stuff I've been wrestling with, and that's in there. Like, hey man, you start writing out, like, there's times where I'll write a pros and cons, and it's just part of my thought process. It's not only, my journaling is not only a meditative experience. It's a lot of different things. Like I said, sometimes it's writing letters to my kids. Sometimes it's writing a to-do list, because I can't get past, if I can't get that out of my head, I won't even get into my quiet time, or I won't get into that deeper thinking. So sometimes the journaling is starting whatever's in my mind is just to get it out. And I think that's what the pen to paper does for me, is it takes whatever's in my mind and allows it to go somewhere else so that I can free up space in my mind. When I just let it
pen to paper too. I'm curious, are you writing pen to paper or computer?
No. Cause then I'll start looking at truck parks and, how to dig a well and all this crap. So I can't, it's always pen to paper.
I would love to see your internet search history just to see all the truck
dude,
stuff.
It is just like, yeah. Truck headlights, fuel pins, governor springs, turbos, intakes, exhaust, downpipes, just
Buck and Billy Ray.
Yeah, Buck and Billy Ray for sure. Got to check out that 36-inch bar on his McCulloch. Bing, 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 bing.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. I haven't been on him all that much lately.
That is one thing you and I would agree on there in the writing practice. Is I've found that I get more out of pen to paper than I do out of writing on a computer, not just for distraction, but just for, there's something about writing on a
the coordination, the hand, But that said,
and it takes,
I
don't know.
If I write though, like if I'm trying to write for production, I can't write because then I know I'm going to have to take it from paper and transcribe it onto the computer. And then there's a bunch of crossing out and all that stuff. But interestingly, I do like to start on paper. I like to, whenever I'm creating an outline, I'm always jotting down some notes, like just some bullets, just some kind of jumping off points. I plop that into a Word doc and then I start bullet pointing it out deeper from there, like in sub bullets and whatnot. But my first maybe 5 ideas or whatever that is on paper. And then I can transcribe that very easily. But writing pages and pages on paper to then have to type that out, that's not my process. It's a few, kind of get the brain going, throw that on the computer, and then I can start to expand that and widen it out.
I mean, it matches kind of the purpose of morning quiet time, of having slower pace. You're trying purposely not to rush.
Fake light and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit the opposite in that I, of course, like to have a little bit more structure in what I'm writing about. And I have experimented a little bit with no structure, but I just find I don't get as much out of it. So for me, there are a series of questions that I'm kind of self-reflecting on every day. And I would say that the main thing I would want to pass on to those listening is the main thing that I found beneficial with writing. Obviously, the clarity of thought. There's something about writing that clarifies your thinking. And I think that then also clarifies your speech, which is an interesting next side benefit. But for me, that's kind of the overarching thing is clarity of thought. So if you're struggling through something, write about it. The other thing is the actual identification. So the main thing I'm trying to do is identify one thing that I can do today in several different categories. So we could say faith, family, fitness, finance, as is often the case with us, but that's kind of where I'm going with this. But here are the questions I self-reflect on as I write, and kind of the things that I'm looking to answer this question by kind of a brain dump of writing, but also then identify what is the one thing I can do to improve these areas. And that idea, you look at the idea of financial compounding. To me, this is personal compounding of like, what can I do today that's going to move me closer to the goal? And then I'm going to repeat that tomorrow. I'm going to take that little chunk that I gained today, I'm going to add to it tomorrow. And then the next day, it's compounding. So I found a tremendous benefit from that practice of what's one thing I can do today. I know I will do it today. Do that. My day is automatically better, and I'm getting better as a person, I believe, as a result of this. So here's the questions I go through are: number one, do I like the person I'm becoming? And I'm going to, for all of these, take them however you like. These are the questions that for me are helpful in thinking through, again, kind of the idea of self. What am I doing as a husband, father, relationships, fitness, finance, etc. So do I like the person I'm becoming? Number two, is my heart for God shrinking or growing? Number three, am I giving my wife and kids my best or my scraps? And I've recently added kind of a follow-up to that I read this week that I was like, oh, that's an interesting way of rephrasing. It's a common wedding vow of, am I loving and faithful, specifically those two words, in good times and in bad? And that's one that I have recently been thinking about the last couple of days. Of that's one that will get you self-reflecting pretty well. Number four, what relationships do I want to add value to? And then number 5, what does my family need more of from me? And again, interpret those however you want. Those are the things that's the structure I'm trying to follow when I write, is thinking through and self-reflecting on those. And then again, what's the one thing I can do to improve on the above? So for question 1, do I like the person I'm becoming? Self-reflect. Yes, there's this one thing. Well, there's the one thing I can do today.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to write that usually I like to-do lists. And so I write that out, because if I don't write it out, I'm going to forget it. So that's another benefit of writing for me, is I'm not great at just remembering things that we talk about or that I hear. So I have to write it down. My wife will tell you this for sure, is if she needs something done, I've told her 1,000 times.
Write that thing.
She's great at it now, but if you write it down and give it to me, okay, I'll remember that now. I'll do that. So again, these are the ways that I've found to be helpful for me in terms of kind of just providing some clarity, some structure, and then that one thing. And I think that's the key, is I've got one bolded and highlighted, because it can't be two things. It needs to be one thing. And it forces me to then, it's a prioritization, but also kind of what is the thing that's going to have the most impact? It forces me to think through that, because you can identify one thing that doesn't do anything, and you can do that. That doesn't help. But it's that kind of, the underlying approach is, what would be the one most impactful thing I could do today? And and take those words exactly as they come, because it's one thing, it's impactful, and it has to be able to be something I could do today. If it's something that's going to take me tomorrow, that doesn't count. It's got to be today. And that's for me, again, sorry, I know that probably the amount of structure there is probably making you very uncomfortable, but
well,
but helpful.
Yeah, but also that structure is making you ask the tough questions. And I think, I mean, it's not that I'm just, lollygagging and not asking tough questions to myself in that random way, but doing it in that systematic way, definitely in terms of marking time, I think there's definitely some benefit there, which is why I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think that I should be trying that and doing, like I said, maybe there is a day where I go, okay, what are these? Maybe there's a day of very specific questions that I'm asking or whatever. And yeah. Random question, as we kind of like round third here, do you have as far as journaling goes, do you have dedicated journals? Like, I use this journal for my daily thinking. I use this journal for the questions that you just posed. I use this journal for the books I'm reading. Or are you chaos like me and have like 5 different journals that are kind of just floating around?
I like these yellow notepads. So as we read through books, I've got a section in the back of this for my notes. I've got pages here that I'm journaling on, and I've got, usually the front page is kind of more of a to-do list. That's I don't know. I like the look of that. It's all in one place. And then when I'm done with that, I have a storage place for all these things that I've written through, and I can go back and look at them if I want or not. So that's what I use.
Yeah.
How about you?
I use Moleskines. I have one for books that we read, one for journals, and then one for like to-do lists. So they're kind of separate. But then I'll sometimes use them interchangeably. For example, if I'm reading a book and a thought comes to my mind and I'm not near that journal, I'm like, well, I'm not going to go look for that thing. I'm just going to write it down in here. And usually that thought is sparked by the book. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but they're compartmentalized, but not fully, I guess is how I'd say it. Like I said, sometimes the to-do list is in the journal because I can't get my mind clear unless I get the crap out of my head. So I got to put that down to be able to free it up to be able to do that. So there's pages in there that just have some to-do stuff that I want to make sure that I don't forget, but that's, there.
One of the benefits of typing these, I'm thinking through right now, it'd be easy to go through like a search feature, like if you're looking for, what was that thing I was thinking of? It's hard to sift through 10 of these written things, but at the same time, I do like the practice of actually writing.
Yeah, I think that the experience of writing and then having to go back and thumb through some of that stuff. And you know what I do on my journals when I'm done with it, I'll say like started, ended. What I could do also on the covers of them is, like the book ones, just write all the books that we went through. So then I know, oh, this journal has these 3, 4, 5 books or whatever it is. And then it's easier to kind of thumb through that. So it's like a cheat search function, but I need to write, because if I'm on the computer, then I'll just get distracted and go other places. So cards, dang it. Yeah.
Anything else? What, I mean, are there any pieces of your morning routine or are there other tools or keys that you found that are helpful for applying or giving some action steps for those listening?
I think the last thing that we can talk about is kind of sharing with people that don't feel like they have the freedom to create a morning routine. And maybe it kind of sucks that we're waiting hours into this thing to share this, because it's probably, most people don't get to choose what their morning routine is. I would have some pushback there. The way to fix that, so if your barrier is, I have a job, my job starts at 7 a.m. Like, here's the thing. We're not going to cover it all, number one, because there's that person that wakes up at 4 a.m. to be at work by 6 a.m. and they don't get home till 6 p.m. and so on and so forth. I get that. If that's the case,
3 jobs and they're going.
Sure.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then keep grinding and find some time at lunch or something. But if that's the life you're living, like you said in that journaling experience, ask, is this what I want to do? Like, is this where the direction that I want to go? And if it's not, then you need to start taking steps to redirect that ship. So that will answer all of the barriers that are hard to answer without having someone providing the barriers for us. But I would say in general, I read a book, Hiram Smith. It was like, I'm going to forget it, but it was like the 10 things you need to do for time management, something along those lines. And he was suggesting that you should have a 2-hour window every day that is just your time, that is no one else's. And for most people, that's going to be 4:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. That's 2 hours of your own time. But Levi, I got to wake up at 4:30. Yeah, it's really easy if you go to bed at 9. It's way more manageable. That's 7.5 hours of sleep. So we're in that window of ideal sleep. You get 2 hours to yourself to think, to dream, to problem solve, to plan your day out, to be as productive as possible, to be as efficient as possible, not just busy. There's a huge difference between being busy and being productive. So having that alone time has helped me, number one, realize that, but then also make sure that I'm getting that in.
I was just doing a calculation here. If you assume you're sleeping 8 hours, 1 hour of your day is 6%.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of whatever you're doing, do you have 6%? And you don't even need it. I don't need an hour for a morning routine. You could not even say, maybe it's not a morning routine. Maybe it's an evening routine, whatever the case may be.
Sure. That's another thing. Do it at night. I don't.
6% of your day that you, I mean, again, it's a choice, right? Like I understand there are different circumstances that people are in, all of that.
But if you can't do these things, that's the hey, like, this is good. So if you can't do this, start figuring out a way to do it. And it's going to be harder for some people. Like, we didn't get to just choose our day either. Like, we did things on the front end that are allowing us now to make decisions that others would want to have the freedom that we have. But we've also made many sacrifices and continue to make sacrifices and make it a priority. So it's harder for some. It's going to be nearly impossible for some, but it is possible. And so that's I like the tough reality.
You get to choose. So what do you want? We're not here to tell you what you should do. This is what we've done morning routine wise. Doesn't mean anyone listening needs to have a morning routine at all. But if you want one, set things up to go get one. And I will say this, I've personally found quite a bit of benefit from the way I've set this day up. And that's why that's the whole reason we were talking about this, is because we've benefited from it and we want others to benefit too. So I think that's a great way to wrap it up, is if you want to go out and we've said this a million times, but you get to choose. So make those choices and be intentional. I think that's the main thing, is be intentional and set it up how you want. Like no one else is going to do it for you. So
it's your move.
Yeah.
Your move 101. It's your move. Get it. Hey, it only took me an hour or something to get into that. Hey.
Product placement.
Yeah. Hey, have a great rest of the week, folks. Hope we encourage you and somehow, hopefully you guys are able to take something away from this. As always, if you have any questions, if you guys want to engage, we're here and always excited to hear from you. So have a great rest of the week and looking forward to our next topic of conversation.